Good morning, it's Miss Jessica here, and I have another episode of Be a 4-H Survivor. So today we're going to talk about another life skill that will come in handy as you move out on your own, or even now if you live at home and you start preparing meals for your family. We're in the kitchen today. We're going to talk about how to read a basic recipe. So I know a lot of our recipes these days come from online. But I love an old-fashioned cookbook. So that's what we're going to look at, just a recipe. So the first thing that I always look at is the active time, so the prep time, the total time, and the cook time. So that tells me how much time I need to set aside to start beginning to prepare this recipe. So if it's a very intense recipe that may take an hour and a half, maybe 30 minutes of prep time, 45 minutes of cook time, and then 15 minutes of cool time before it's time to serve the meal. I'm probably not going to do that on a weeknight when I have to work. We have sports practices, things to run back and forth from, and that may be reserved for maybe a Saturday or Sunday when I have a little more time at home. So that's the first thing you want to look at, because you don't want to get started in a recipe and then realize that you have somewhere to be in 30 minutes, but your recipe needs another hour. So that's an important thing to look at. The next thing to look at is the serving size. So this one, it says makes 4, but that's also known as the serving amount. So that's how many people your recipe will serve. Now, funny story, one time around Christmas, I was making gingerbread cookies and I did not read the serving size. So I ended up making 64 cookies because my recipe was so large. Now, if I would have realized that, I could have picked a different recipe that only served maybe 12 or 24 cookies, enough for me and my family. Instead, I had enough cookies to feed the whole neighborhood. If you choose a recipe and it has a very large serving size, maybe it serves 12 people and there's only 5 in your family, you can cut that in half. So you can go through the ingredients list, and where it says 1 cup, you would only use a half a cup. Where it says 2 tablespoons, you would only use 1 tablespoon. So there is a way that you can cut that recipe in half to fit your needs. Now the next thing I always look at before I begin cooking, now all of this is before I begin cooking, I'm going to look at the ingredients list. So the ingredients list tells me what I will need for my recipe. Now if I have a very exotic recipe with lots of things that I don't already have, I'll need to make a grocery list so I know what I will need to prepare this recipe. Now if I am going through this list and I know that I have some things already, I'll go ahead and pull them out of the cabinets to gather all my supplies before I begin cooking this recipe. So it's important to know that you have everything on the ingredients list before you begin. You don't want to get halfway through and realize that you are out of eggs, and you're going to need eggs if you're going to bake a cake. Now you can do some research and find substitutes or alternatives. Instead of oil, you can use applesauce, things like that. But that's a topic for another time. So there are some shortcuts and tricks you can use if you don't have the recipe or the ingredients that the recipe calls for, but it's always a good idea to look at that recipe list first. Now, the second thing we want to do as we begin cooking, so we know how long it's going to take us, we know how many people it's going to feed, we know that we have all of our ingredients and we've already pulled them out of the cabinets, we're ready to begin cooking. Now, it's important to read the directions first. So you want to read through and know exactly what you're going to do, because sometimes recipes call for utensils that we may not have, or there's orders in which things go. So if you don't read the directions list, you don't do it in the order, it could be a fatal mistake and ruin your recipe. So you want to be sure, especially if the first step is to preheat the oven or something like that. So the first step, if you're using the oven, usually the first step is to preheat the oven. So the oven has time to heat up while you prepare, you follow the rest of the instructions so that when you're done preparing the food, it is ready to go in the already heated up oven to cut down on your time. So that's important. If it says to preheat the oven first, that's what you want to do first. But as you follow a recipe, most of them are set out really well so that you know exactly what you're doing in what order, and they're trusted that people have done these before. If you are on Pinterest a lot of the blogs that accompany the recipes, They tell you step by step why they did this, what they did, what recipe they used, why they use certain products. So those can be really helpful if you're intrigued and you like learning about why things work like that. That can be a great resource for you. Now, another thing that a lot of recipes have are the nutrition facts. Now, not all recipes have these, but some of them do, but it just gives you an insight onto what you're putting in your body. So it can tell you the calories, the protein, carbohydrates, and total fat. Now, not all recipes have this, but if you're into nutrition and knowing what you put into your body, recipes like this one that have that already listed are a great thing to have. So I hope this is helpful as you begin experimenting in the kitchen and learning to cook and use recipes. If you need recipes that are trusted and true, we have some great resources with our Tennessee Nutrition and Consumer Education Program, our TNCEP program here at UT Extension. We would be happy to get you a cookbook. Those are often cookbooks that have low cost recipes in them, and they're really good. So reach out to us if you need that resource.